Welcome everybody. This is a slides interaction to begin with. What is this photo showing? Anybody can speak up, turn your mics on, type something in the chat. What is this photo showing?
Is that the James Bond to Russia from With Love snow scene?
Sledding.
No.
You said sledding.
Sorry?
Sledding.
People having fun.
They are having fun. They're on jet skis. You're right. Yep.
Like a motorbike gang on snowmobiles.
Motorbike gang on snowmobiles. These answers are so far away from where I was hoping to go. No.
Search party.
Beg your pardon?
Search party.
Third party. A search party.
Yes.
It probably could be a search party. It's not. This is the border between Sweden and Norway. Interestingly enough, isn't it? Jono and I have been going through Vikings, the TV show, for the last, I'm going to say, year. It's taken that long to get to where we are. And this here made me rather curious. This is where the nations are now, and if you follow that show, whether it's true to history or not, it seems to be rather fanciful in some ways. You go, well, all these nations at war, all this conflict going on, what on earth does it mean? What does it relate to? Is there any scriptural precedents or anything? And along with watching that, I've been doing a bit of reading through Deuteronomy recently. And there's this really good verse in Deuteronomy. Where's my mouse? Where God says this in Deuteronomy: when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided up mankind, he set the boundaries of the people according to the number of the sons of Israel. I was like, okay, that's cool. So does that mean every single nation on earth is then defined by God according to the number of Israel? Does that mean that Sweden and Norway and this border here, is that a definition according to the number of the children of Israel? Or am I just taking that far too far? And is that seen anywhere else through scripture? It actually is, which is quite cool. Further borders for you to have a good look at. Some are natural, some are made up. That one through Belgium and the Netherlands, going straight through somebody's door. You have this waterfall between Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. Paul picks up the same fact in Acts. So that's why we had a look at his speech that he gave to the Athenians this morning, where he says a very similar thing that Moses says back in Deuteronomy. From one man he made every nation of the human race to inhabit the earth, determining their set times and fixed limits of the places where they would live. Now, if Paul is saying that, let's say 700-800 years later on, no, it's even longer, isn't it, from Moses? So the same precedent seems to live on with Paul, that he's telling the Athenians that God has established nations and fixed the places where they're going to live. But Paul offers a bit of a different reason as to why God has done this, so that they would search for God and perhaps grope around for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. If I go back and I look at that bottom left-hand one, Mexico looks a bit dingy. Arizona on the other side is quite nice. Does that make Mexico or America search for God? Does a waterfall make Brazil or Paraguay or Argentina search and grope around for God, etc.? So what's going on here? What is Paul driving at with this idea of our nations, our places being fixed and determined to search out and find God? Or am I taking this verse too literally, too much on face value, and there's really no exhortation in it? Maybe we've got 20 minutes of that, who knows? But there is precedence. There actually is precedence that God says to Moses and to the people of Israel, hey, look, I've given this land to Ammon, and also to Moab in the same chapter of Deuteronomy. He specifies very much where that land is. It's between this mountain range and that river and this border, so do not put 1 foot over it. And then he says later on in Amos to the Ammonites particularly, because you went beyond your borders, you expanded too far, I'm going to come along and punish you for such things. So there is precedence already where God says to one nation, hang on, this is your defined area, that's yours. It's a promise I've made to you. Here's a similar thing with the Philistines, interestingly enough. He took them from some old area called Caphtar and placed them in their land. And the same thing back in Amos as well, he has a similar punishment for the Philistines. Not for expansion of borders, but for pretty much mistreating other people around them anyway. So a precedence is set that we know. God does define where nations live. We know that he defines where empires come from. We know that he uses them as tools for his plan and his purpose, like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, Persia, or even Rome, right? So is there any benefits to the children of Israel? Is there any benefit to those people that live in those nations and those empires to grope around and search for God? One that comes to mind straight away is Paul, very distinctly saying, hey, look, I'm actually a Roman citizen. Is it legal for you to lash a man who is a Roman citizen without fair trial? So what benefits did Paul look at as being a Roman that said, hang on, I can use this for God. I can use my citizenship in this country to do things which are beneficial to bringing people to God. It's like, well, I can free myself from jail for starters. I can stop myself being beaten without a point. I can travel freely around this whole empire. He could do a lot of things because he was a Roman citizen. And he just didn't see it as being a waste of time or pointless. So how do we see things in this little old country as being beneficial for God? How do we use New Zealand as a place that gives us opportunities to help people search out and, as Paul says, grope around for God, to find him and seek him? There's this institute, the Cato Institute, I think it's in Canada. They put together a study back in 2019. They've been doing it for some years now, where they look at the Human Freedom Index. They came to a conclusion that New Zealand is actually on top of human freedom. So from a world point of view, we as a country, we have a lot of things that benefit us in freedom. Personal freedom is one of their indicators that they use. Under personal freedom, they look at the rule of law, the security of a country, the movement within a country, the religious freedom of that country, the expression of thoughts that you can have in that country. And of those indicators, New Zealand's ranked out of 162 countries 5th in personal freedom. So if we consider what the rule of law is like here, and I know that we can talk about different things, that we don't have enough punishments or penalties, etc., but our police are quite nice, aren't they? Our security, yeah, we hear reports of, and this week as well, shocking things about security, but comparatively, we are still quite a safe country. Movements. Used to be said that our passport could get us anywhere, or quite a lot of places around the world. It was one of the most sought after because you could move quite freely around the world. Religious freedom. There's a lot of freedom for religion, isn't there, compared to other countries? So how can we, like Paul, how can we use these benefits in our country as residents and citizens to bring people closer to God? Thinking about what we do at Pakuranga, like Helen has some amazing classes going on with her Chinese friends that a few of our brethren participate in. So these are Chinese who have come from a culture which is so different to what we have here, and they can see those benefits of this country that have helped them to find God. And there's a really cool thing when you go back to that verse in Acts to see where the personal indicators can lead further. So there's a bit more about that. Our personal freedoms are fifth, economic freedoms third. And then you find a whole bunch of other indicators, and it tells us that a human freedom, which makes us top the list, brings us to first. So yeah, that's New Zealand's benefit. The personal benefits, though, when we have a look at this word determined, now there's a commentary on the notes on the Bible. Barnes put this together. The Greek there for determines their set places is as in fixed or marked at a boundary. Okay, right, what does that mean? Now, if any of you have been going around for your daily walks or looking at your own properties lately, you would have come across a whole bunch of these things, particularly here in Auckland, the way things have gone with homes and whatnots. These are markers, fixed points, fixed locations that indicate where your land is, where your property is. And you'll notice them more and more and more as you walk around. So these determine the fixed locations of lands that is yours or that is owned by somebody. And it can then be represented through these little plans here. So it tells you how big, how wide, what angles it's on, who owns what piece, where a house might be located within it. And the really awesome thing about this, it's a legal document. So it legally defines what is on it, where things are located, the heights of things, and there can't be any dispute over it. So that's the fixed boundaries of things that we have as parcels of land, that people possess as parcels of land, personal possession. And God has the very same thing with his lands, with his people. See, when they were allowed to go back into the land of Israel, God says to them in Deuteronomy that their land was a blessing to them, that they would approach him with sacrifices of freewill offerings, and they would say unto them that this is given to you, these sacrifices from my land are given to you because you've now saved me from persecution and slavery in Egypt. So it's a representation of a safe haven. It's a place that they could settle in. It's a place that they could take solace in. It's a place where they could celebrate God and his good mercies. And I believe that's why God says to them, your boundaries, your borders, your fixed places, which are defined by me, they cannot be moved. These markers that are set down, do not tamper with them, he says in Proverbs 23. He tells them in Deuteronomy 27 that cursed are those people who move these landmarks. And there's even sanctity, as we see in Proverbs 15. The Lord tears down the house of the proud, but he maintains the boundaries of the widow. These very boundaries which are there to show them what is legally theirs, what is legally their safe haven from other things happening around them. So what can we do with that bit of land, with that safe haven away from the world? What are things that God said that Israel could do? Well, you could celebrate the Feast of Weeks, for instance. This is one way that you could use your piece of land. Remembering that you were slaves in Egypt, remembering that I had brought you out of Egypt and put you into a safe haven. I'd put you into your own land. And I'd given you definite, defined locations and bearings, fixed points in your land. So you can celebrate, you can put the sickle in, you can harvest out your wheat, you can harvest out your corn, and you can bring these things unto me in sacrifice. These are things that remind us, like in 2 Corinthians, God says that he loves the cheerful giver, right? Those that give back to God cheerfully from what is theirs, using their land, using their place that he has offered to them in an honorable way, a way that serves him, that gives him glory, that allows people to come unto him. See, in 2 Corinthians, he says, just as it is written, he is scattered widely, he is given to the poor, his righteousness remains forever. Our God, who provides seed for the sower, bread for food, will provide and multiply your supply of seed and will cause the harvest of your righteousness to grow. You will be enriched in every way so that you may be generous in every occasion, which is producing through us thanksgiving to God. Because the service of this ministry is not only providing the needs of the saints, but also overflowing with many thanks to God. The service that we do, being generous in every occasion, if we use what he has blessed us with, if we use our safe haven for him, to allow people to see him in that safe haven. Again, he says, when you reap your field, leave the unraked grain there. You mustn't return to it. It should go to the resident foreigner, to the orphan, to the widow, so that the Lord your God will bless all the work you do. Is likewise the olive tree or your grapes. And why do you do such a thing? Because you remember that you were slaves in Egypt. You remember that this land that I've given you with these fixed markers that's been defined by me with these boundaries is now there for you, and use it in a way that honors me. Use it in a way that allows you to remember where I have brought you from. That allows people to see me in what you use it as. Just as James says, pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this, to care for orphans and widows in their misfortune, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Looking out for those that maybe have less, that can't do what we can do, that don't have the same sort of safe haven, the same blessing, the same defined positions and markers that God has given to us. You saw before on that plan, it had a house in it, and obviously the Jews also had houses in their land. So what does God say that they can do with their house? Well, the words that I command you, he says, speak of them as you sit in your house, as you walk, as you lie down and get up, and scribe them on the door frames of your houses, on your gates, in these pieces of land that I've given to you, that I've blessed you with. These pieces of land, these boundaries that are there to allow people to seek me, to come to me, to search out for me. So we have, in a national sense, we have what our country offers us, what maybe an empire offered citizens back in Paul's day, back in Israel's day, to search out for God, to grope around for him and find him. And we have a personal sense, right? We have a home or a place to live, a safe haven that God's blessed us with for the same purpose. But there are a lot of other boundaries and fixed points that God has through Scripture. And the key one comes out here in Romans 1. This is another defined or fixed point, another defined boundary that God uses to allow people to come to him and search for him. Concerning his son, who was a descendant of David with reference to the flesh, was appointed the Son of God in power according to the Holy Spirit by the resurrection from the dead. Appointed, fixed, and marked as a boundary. Christ himself has been fixed and set as the Son of God according to the resurrection of the dead. Previously, yes, he was the Son of Man. He had every chance or every opportunity to be like we are, to be frail like we are. Yet he overcame. And he overcame through his death and resurrection. God raised him from the dead. He raised him and has now fixed him as his son. That is now God's defined point of reference to allow people to come to him through his son because of the resurrection. And that's why Paul carries on through that speech to the Athenians. He has appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. And he has given assurance to all men because he has raised him from the dead. That marker, that definition that God has set out that allows people to come to him. Like the markers that he put in the land. He said to the children, don't move these markers. If you do, you will be cursed. I think that ties quite nicely into what Ron was telling us on Wednesday, right? People who change the reference of Christ, people who change the reference of God in their lives, they become like the Antichrist. They are denying the references and the markers that God has laid down. And now Jesus and his resurrection, that is the reference, that's the marker, that's the fixed location that we can all look around and see God and search out for God. Just as he said, even before Christ was born, I tell of the decree, the Lord said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, the ends of the earth your possession. As you will take that land, you will possess those countries, those will be your boundaries, your borders, because you are my son. You will break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's clay. So these are the things that we can see. These are the things that we can see nationally. These are the things that we can see personally. And this is the spiritual that we can see to allow us to search for God, to allow others to search and grope around for God and find him.